The power of laughter. You know, when you speak for a living, humor can be a great tool to use. I use it all the time, but I'm no comedian. That's what makes today's guest so interesting because he is a comedian, but one that also works with corporations. Let's have ourselves a pocket sized pep talk because humor can be a little trickier than you might imagine. And I'm thrilled to have a professional comedian who delivers keynotes in the studio. We're going to swap some stories, connect those two professions, and this is going to be fun.
A Pocket Sized Pep Talk, the podcast that can help energize your business and your life with a quick, inspiring message. Now, here's your host, Rob Jolles.
Today's guest, Scott Bloom, is a veteran comedian, television personality, and highly respected professional MC and keynote speaker. Scott has built a reputation as the go-to choice for business humor, having hosted hundreds of events over 2 decades for companies such as FedEx, Ford, IBM, MetLife, PepsiCo, Pfizer, and Verizon. And believe me, there's more. He's been featured on Comedy Central, has hosted his own weekly VH1 series, as well as a national simulcast for the Grammy Awards from the Palace Theater. And he's the author of You Can Judge a Book by Its Cover. Happy to have you with us, and welcome to the show, Scott.
Rob, wow, I loved listening to my own accomplishments. Wow, I'm a big deal.
You are, I'm sure when they invite you onto the stage every now and then, because that's tricky. I don't want to come off as being obnoxious, but I need an opening. But I always walk up kind of sheepishly, like that is me, and most of it's true.
Right, exactly. Most of it's true. Well, look, you mentioned VH1. I did that quite a while ago, but as I've told people, even 10 years ago when I was still using the VH1 credit, which I don't usually use on stage, but I said at the time, if I had done Falcon Crest or Dynasty, that would be on as well. But, I think it's important, we're going to talk a little bit about comedy. We'll talk a little bit about keynoting, but, when I get introduced, I want them to know that I am a comedian. I want them to know that I'm there to make them laugh, to sort of set the stage, set the expectations, because they're not used to that coming into their meeting. Whether I'm emceeing or keynoting, I think that's important.
Yeah. And I'm the complete opposite. I am so thrilled not to be a comedian because then I can do what I do and sneak humor on them. I go, boy, that guy's funny. But they don't have their arms crossed going, oh, okay, comedian, make us laugh. Remind people, teach us about sales. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I think that's the difference, between what I do and maybe a traditional keynote is we know that, I just came back from the NSA Influence, the National Speakers Association, and everyone wants to put humor into their presentation. It's almost essential. I kind of feel the same way about the difference between what I'm doing in a corporate audience and what I used to do as a stand-up on a comedy stage in a comedy club. There was a lot more of that make me laugh, arms crossed. Here, I still feel, even as an MC, and even though they know I'm a comedian and have that background, I still feel like every time there's a moment that's funny, it's still a surprise. They're not looking for it, so there's a lot less pressure. But I want them to know I'm giving them permission to laugh. And I was just talking to another MC and another keynote. He doesn't really do comedy, but they're making their decision that, this as a speaker, in that first 60 seconds. Do we trust this guy? He looks like he's confident. Are we going to learn something from him? So with me, it's very important that they know right from the beginning, oh, they're going to be laughing.
Right. Yeah, well, that makes sense. It's funny, you said, of course, we have to have humor. I will tell you that when I train speakers, although, all right, don't tell anyone, but I sure would love them to have humor. And we don't have to jam it down the audience's throat, but just a little bit. But it so freaks out really talented speakers. They put such pressure on themselves that, I wrote a book about presenting, and the first thing I did was give them 30 ways to be interesting with only one being humor. In other words, there's a lot of other things you can do. For instance, I've looked at your website. I don't even need to hear you. I don't even think there is audio, but I see movement. I see you in the audience. I see you involving that audience. And I'm assuming that they look like they're laughing too, but just doing that really makes it interesting. At the end of the day, I want to be interested in you, and there's so many ways to do that, humor being one of them.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we're always as speakers trying to find ways, to engage our audiences. And I think the fact of the matter is, some people are naturally funny, and some people that's not their forte. That's not their strength. So it's kind of hard to impose, hey, take this funny line, and I think you'll get a laugh out of it, especially if they don't feel comfortable about it with it.
Right.
So I
Right.
think it's real important that they know their lane, but the speakers that I like, I saw some great speakers at the conference. There's a woman named Diana Kander. She's pretty big in the industry. She spoke on the main stage, and she had some great things to say. But based on a couple of things she said, she kind of prides herself on her humor. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but she is naturally funny. But she's not trying to put a funny presentation on. And I think those speakers. Who did I see last year? Mark Sharon Brock, I think that's his name. Um, he's in the Hall of Fame. He's just naturally funny, but he has a great talk as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. I think that's, and we're going to start drawing a line between the two of us. I think that's what you'll find great professional speakers. We look like it's just sort of dripping in there. In other words, we don't tell jokes. Two guys were walking across the street and the first guy says the second one, but we'll say funny things. And if we're doing our job right, it will look like we've never said it before, that it's just coming at the moment. And quite frankly, I love the spontaneous exercises with the audience because then, in a sense, you are proving to the audience, I'm working with what we have here. I didn't bundle this up and drag this joke with me. This just happened. And so I think there's some authenticity to involving that audience because you're proving your point. You are spontaneous.
Right. And spontaneity goes a long way too. I mean, I was just talking to someone about the idea. I'm fine with something going wrong. My mic goes out or whatever. Gives me that moment to find something funny, that maybe I hadn't planned. So one of the differences between I bill myself as a comedic keynote when I'm keynoting. When I'm working as an MC, I'm just a funny MC. I just call it an MC. But I distinguish it as a comedic keynote is that I'm bringing comedy to there. It's not like I'm occasionally going to say something funny. There are written pieces that obviously look spontaneous. That was a great line I learned from when I was first doing stand up. About a comedian told me, you want everything that's written to look like it's spontaneous, and everything that's spontaneous kind of to look like it's written. That gives it more weight. It's a
Yeah.
it's a great way to do it. But so I'm coming in with comedy pieces. It's all strung together with a message, but I'm not necessarily occasionally going to say something funny. There's a lot of, it's built so there's a lot of laughter there because that's a part
Right.
of my message.
Right. Right. So let's go back just for a little bit.
Sure.
A lot of times I'm talking to authors, and you are an author of a book. You seem to downplay your book a little bit, but by God, welcome to the club. But a lot of times I'll ask an author, how did that book find you? Because we don't usually find a book, it kind of finds us. You're a little different. I'm curious, how did comedy find you? Because I don't think you found it. I think there's a story there. So, what is the story?
Well, I think most comedians, I think
Hmm.
it's a family upbringing. It was everything from a reflexive, defensive way of dealing with things. Everything's kind of a joke, but also it's the relationships you have. I had a relationship with my dad. My dad always prided himself on being funny, and I think I learned a lot about humor from him. Though I tell him it skips a generation. But I think I found a lot, and just making him laugh. So that became something that kept on being reinforced. And I remember when I was at day camp. I might have been going into second grade, so I'm only like 8, 9, maybe not even that, 7, 8, 9 years old, 7, 8. Um, and I said something funny. And I remember at 7 years old, one of the kids going, "Hey, you're really funny." Like I registered that. So I think comedy, even when I was doing reports in junior high and stuff, and we had to stage something about how the leopard got his spots or something like that, I was writing like little funny scripts. Comedy became sort of who I was. Humor became who I was. And once I went to college, I started an improv group based on something I saw. I think Second City might have been traveling. I was in Houston at the time and I saw him. So I didn't really know what I was doing. So we kind of improvised even the show and how every scene would blend into it. And I realized, starting this improv group, that this is something I really, really enjoyed. And my career path, during the summers while I was in college, I was going down working for my dad's company. Everyone in my family's been in sales, supposed to be a salesman. And I remember it was my I was going into my senior year that I said to my father, or maybe it was right after that, I said, listen, I'd love to be a regional branch manager sooner than most people because I have some nepotism on my side, but I want to become a comedian and actor, and that's the direction I want to go. So instead of going down to Houston where he was living, I went to New York and started my stand-up career.
Right now, as the father of a comedian myself, when I got that bulletin, they had to pick me up off the floor. I'm just curious, did Dad go, "Oh boy, that sounds like a brave plan," or how did he respond to that?
Well, it's funny you say that because I was just talking to my daughter who's pursuing a modeling career and an acting career. And I'm so cool with that because that's the path I took. My parents were great. My dad, always a frustrated comedian. When he was 60, he actually started doing some open mics in Chicago. Um, I think he wanted to live vicariously through me, so he was cool with that. My mom was supportive of it. You would think most parents would want them to take a more safer and traditional route. And now with my kids, whatever they want to decide, I took an unusual path, being an artist, being a comedian, not always a lot of financial security. I came up in the late 80s when comedy was booming, where you turn on the TV and there's a brick wall behind, every
Right.
person on stage, every restaurant, every bar had a comedy night. So I was able to make a living within like 3 years of doing stand-up. I was very lucky. We have obviously a renaissance in comedy and a resurgence now with podcasts, and comedy couldn't be bigger, I think, than right now. People filling theaters and arenas, but they seem to be very, very supportive. And if my kids wanted to go that path, I believe whatever you want to do, you can actually accomplish.
Yeah. Well, you're a little more evolved than me. It took me a little bit of time to get there.
Yeah,
I was, what's our backup plan? I'm sure you've heard
right.
that one before, but I evolved, and my son taught me some great lessons. And one of them was, I'm so thrilled now. He's been a stand-up for 10, 12 years, that look, he's happy doing this. He generates enough income to take care of himself. He who am I to say you shouldn't be doing that?
Right.
Anyway, but I had to evolve a little bit. I was behind him 1,000%, but when he wasn't looking, I was chewing my nails. And but anyway, it's just interesting hearing you had a little easier run of it. I think my son was a little tougher. We tried to kind of ease him out of the idea, but you know what? If comedy found you, it found him. When a book, a profession, whatever it is, finds you, I think our job is to be supportive and just step out of the way. And so kudos to your dad.
Yeah, my son is kind of entrepreneurial. He's going to his senior year now, but when he was like 30, he was on YouTube when he was like 10, just making videos. He had his own sort of little tech company at like 12 where he's helped seniors. He still has some clients, they want to do things. And anytime he has an idea, I just, you hear what your parents would tell you, kind of I'm not going to analyze you, but a lot of what you're telling your son was probably what you got from your parents.
Exactly.
And I try to fight that instinct to go, yeah, but what about this? What, like finding all the problems. Now I just, whatever he comes up, he wants to do a power wash company where he's going to go to driveways and stuff. I think there might be some issues, but I'll let him find out on his own. I just don't want to have to be that person to squelch his, I wouldn't say that's a dream, but any of his efforts. I mean, these entrepreneurial ideas, just because I can't see it, maybe he's going to see it differently, and then he'll learn from, any of the failures or mistakes.
Yeah. It's funny how we get molded when we're young. I'll touch on this dad thing one more time, and then I want to go start swapping some process moves. But you were talking about your dad. One thing about my dad, and I consider it such a blessing. I'm pretty sure my dad had ADD. You didn't even name it. The greatest generation didn't have ADD. Okay, they
Right,
just
right.
they just didn't. They punch you in the nose if you said they did. But my dad would ask me, "How did your day go?" and whatever. And when I was 4 or 5, I go, "Well, Stinky Lewis did this and that," and he would drift away in 45 seconds, and it was kind of crushing. But I'm not kidding you, Scott. By the time I was 7, I learned how to tell a story, get to the point, get it out, get the humor point out there, but move. And where your friends were saying you might be a comedian, my friends were actually telling me you should be an actor. You should be, you tell stories well. But I owe it to this audience that taught me you don't have all day to get to your point here. So if you could hold Lee Jollis, you could hold anyone. And so this is a very half full telling, but I'm really grateful for that. So it's funny how we imprint on our kids one way or the other. So anyway,
Hey, if I had a better family upbringing, I probably wouldn't be a comedian. So, that's how it all works. It's like,
see, that's more half full than me, but well done, sir.
Yes,
All right.
that's how it works.
That's how it works. All right, let's talk about some of the differences between a professional speaker. I'm gonna be in the corner on the right. You be in the corner on the left. So when you're giving a keynote as a comedian, give me that split of sort of information and humor, or is there information? Are you just there to motivate, inspire, and entertain?
Well, I was thinking about this because I knew you might be asking this question. And I think one of the differences, I'm hoping that my audience, it's more of an experiential, I'm going to be redundant here, experience. It's more experiential as opposed to feeding them thoughts that they have to think about. It's more visceral than cerebral. I'm almost modeling what I'm talking about. I talk about building relationships and connecting with people, and it's based on what I've learned over my many years as an entertainer, as an MC, dealing with audiences, building those relationships. And a lot of these companies that come back year after year, and there is a relationship that occurs. And I'm hoping they're seeing what I talk about. And of course, I have to talk, and there is some lessons. But a lot of the takeaway is how they've felt during that experience. And I come back to that afterwards. I talk about how important it is to have that emotional connection. And to have an emotional connection, you got to show up, you got to get out of your head, you've got to be, present and take the attention off yourself and put it on another person. And they see, because of the way I customize the comedy and it's about them, that they see I've actually taken the time to make it about them. That builds the relationship. And they're laughing. It's a funny thing. That's the emotion that I'm creating. So all of a sudden they feel like they're connected to me. They have this relationship because I made them feel something. And I tell them that, I'm using, comedy and humor, but you can make a connection with someone just by listening to them, supporting them, affirming them, being there for them. And it's about, we're in that phase now, I think, in society where everyone's looking for more authenticity. That's maybe an overused word, but it's what we're really talking about now. And they see me being kind of vulnerable and authentic. I'm on stage, 1,000 people. I'm trying to make them laugh. Everyone's imagining what that would be like, and it's terrifying for people. And I still, when I first started keynoting, I used to MC, so I'm doing 10-minute segments. Now I'm doing a whole hour.
Right.
In the beginning, there was that feeling of, what if I'm 5 minutes in and they're just not digging me, and I got another 55 minutes to go? Thankfully, that has never happened. But that's a feeling that, you have to overcome. So they have, I think, a respect for what I'm doing, and they can see that I'm less concerned with myself, what's going on, and I'm putting my attention just on them. And that creates a comfortability, it creates a bond, it creates an emotional experience.
Well, and you just answered the question and what I was really looking for too, which is when you're doing a comedy club, you're not teaching anybody anything. You don't have to. I mean, if they learn something, great, but they don't go out and going, well, that guy Scott was good, but I'm not sure how I apply this to my job in the morning. Whereas when you're keynoting, and that's what I thought was interesting, you're not doing 60 minutes of comedy. You're a comedian with a message, and it sounds like that's kind of your shovel almost of how you integrate the two. And I find that fascinating. Do you do any workshops?
I don't do any workshops, but I'm constantly looking to expand. I'd have to find out what I'd want to do. I think I could probably figure that out. I mean, what I'm exploring now is helping other speakers, bring some humor and some comedy into their presentations. They see what I can do, and they figured, you'd be the person to help me. But I think the approach that I would take, and I haven't yet brought anyone on, but there's a couple people I'm talking about, is it's more of when I watch a presentation, I'll see, oh, there was a missed moment. I wouldn't, here's a line you could have said. And so it's not turning these keynotes into comedians, just there's opportunities they missed, especially the ones that are kind of funny. There's a lot more they can do. And laughter goes a long way. Laughter connects you, the audience to the speaker, but it also connects everyone together. It does have that positive vibe and everyone feels good. And when you're laughing, you're a little bit more open, a little more receptive to taking things in. So it's pretty powerful. I mean, that's one of my taglines, the power of laughter, language of business. And that's because I think I'm starting to talk more and more about this, about how we need to laugh more now. I mean, it almost seems like just a platitude. Oh, we need to laugh more. But, between politics and AI and technology and just normal stress and prices going up and all that other stuff, that for them, it's a little bit of a stress reliever. They enjoy laughing. And I even start off going, who doesn't like to laugh? I mean, and then I might
Right.
point out that one guy.
Yeah, I think you have that on your website too. I dropped
Yeah,
that website in real fast. We'll get it at the end too, but normally I'm pumping a book. Let's make sure people know about your website. What's it called
sure.
again?
They can go to scottbloomconnects.com.
There you go.
Scott
All right.
Bloom,
We'll
bloom
have
like
it
the
on our
flower.
site and all that
Yeah.
good stuff.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Okay. Well, one of the things I'm going to give you a little nudge on is, and we may talk about this after we go off the air here, is don't fall asleep on the workshop side of this thing. Keynote opens the door. You're working with major companies. I'm looking at your bio. That's how you go from one delivery to 15 deliveries. And but if you thought an hour is a little makes you nervous, try a day or two.
Yes.
But
So
we're
is
doing a
that is
lot of
that something
exercises and role plays. Yeah.
you do a lot of that as well, I
Oh
guess.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And that really, remember, when we were talking about the differences, I don't know the split. Let's make one up. I'm guessing you're almost 70-30 on the comedy side. I'm lucky if I've got 30% humor. I mean, I'm 70% on the information side. I'm teaching a group how to sell. I'm teaching a group how to, different tasks that I'm giving them, how to handle objections. And I'm making them laugh while we're doing it. But if I get
Right.
anywhere near 50-50, there's going to be a few people in the corner going, did we hire a comedian or did we hire a professional
Right.
speaker? So I gotta not stray over that line. Where I can, it's not a clean cut, by the way. It may be 30% humor. I doubt it's that high, but there's percentage points I'm picking up for creativity, for doing things that they haven't seen before, moves that a professional speaker would make, that where we will do things that we kind of know what the outcome will be, but ways of making our point. And I could drop one or two on you, but I'll leave that for now. But anyway, yeah, I'm going to give you a nudge into workshops when this is done. Okay, let's push forward. You, my one of the things where my son and I used to, he did one corporate gig. He doesn't do it anymore. But he used to always tell me, yeah, I'm trying this material out. I'm trying that material out. I bombed in Minnesota, but I'm going to get him in Wisconsin. I'm like, what do you mean you bombed in Minnesota? He's like, yeah, they hated me. I wasn't real thrilled with them either. And I thought, that ain't the corporate world. There is no such thing as bombing. Even when you said, if I get 5 minutes in and not responding, I've already been there. I'm going to finish your sentence. Then you grind and fight like hell to figure out how to connect with that audience. But it isn't, hey, I'm learning new material. Not every joke works. So I guess I'm half answering my question, Scott. My apologies. But talk to me about, kind of that separation of bombing at a comedy club and then the responsibility in a corporate gig.
What's interesting about that question is I've definitely bombed in comedy clubs more than I want to remember. I remember driving back from Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. Someone was driving me and I was just banging my head in the side of the window. It's terrible, terrible. I got to stop doing this. For whatever reason, there's more consistency with the corporate audiences. I've been doing this for a long time, and I don't think I've ever officially bombed ever. It's not being arrogant. It's just that I know what I need to do in these events. Some audiences are better than others, but bombing's not really a thing. I don't know why. I think it's there's in comedy clubs, there's a lot of variables when you're going on in a performance, who you're following, what they've been drinking that night. There's a lot of consistency. I mean, I went from doing a comedy at like 8 p.m. at night. Now I do it sometimes at 8 a.m. And I've learned what that looks like. And I'm not trying out. It's a weird thing with this, because I know most stand-ups, if they're going a new bit, they got to work it and workshop it and work. You get one shot. So if I'm going to try something, you have an intuitive sense that it's going to work, and you keep it kind of, you keep it kind of tight. Maybe it doesn't get as good of a laugh as it should get. But I mean, there have been bits that I've been working. I mean, they did well, and they're even that much better. I think if I ever went on stage having to think of, as a comedian, you'll size up an audience. You go, oh, this audience is not going to like me. Once again, you get different demographics, different socioeconomic backgrounds with this. With corporate, even, associations a little different, but they're there watching. They're not drinking. They're hopefully wanting to be there. That's not always the case, but I'm able to have the confidence that I know this work has worked time and time again. That's why when I customize material, what I'm really doing is taking a bit that's 80% tried and true. It's going to work. And I sprinkle 20% over. It's an overlay. So now I'm talking about your acronyms, but I know the bit works. I don't think I'd ever go on. I also do some interactive games, not in my keynote, but when I'm emceeing. And that to me is, I get a sense the game's going to work. So there's not the pressure on having to be funny, but the humor is going to come through me bantering with people in the audience. Once again, we're talking about interactive. I'll jump in the audience and I'll play that. So as doing it this long, and it's a little bit different than stand-up, I can have an intuitive sense of what works and what doesn't. And then if I do something that maybe it was working for a little while, but I've never gotten it to where I really wanted, I'll just let it go. I'll just drop it from the routine.
Yeah. For me, and I think, and I, by the way, I did stand up twice. My knees were knocking, and one of the guys I followed,
or what kind of
open mic, and if there were 15 people, 13 of them were comedians nervously working on their material with their heads down while I was talking about what's this with Cracker Jacks? When are they going to redo the box? So anyway, kind of hacked it, but for me, and a guy who's been at this professional side for close to 40 years, I can tell you that, and watching my son countless times, when I see a comedian, I don't think the audience cares whether, if you actually could look at him and go, I'm really trying hard. Okay, we're not paying you to try hard. Make us laugh. But in a corporate gig, if you don't lose sight of the fact that I'm going to give you everything I got. Look, I got 100 gigs a year. One's the best, one's the worst, and 98 are in the middle. It has nothing to do with me forgetting to show up or work as hard as I can. When a corporate audience sees you sweat, that's a good thing, by the way. In other words, sees you working, sees you trying as hard as you can, they will get behind you. In comedy, I don't really think that plays out so much.
No, it doesn't.
Just the material.
Yeah. I mean, that's the whole thing, is you have to feel so comfortable in your skin and up on stage that if a joke doesn't work, and I don't really do jokes, so it's not like, oh, there's a setup, they're seeing it coming, and a punchline, and oh, did they laugh or didn't laugh? It's written in a different way so that it's being funny, and if they don't, some of the jokes might be more subtle, so I might get a little less laugh. But there's never something like, hey, you drove us up to this place right here, and then you hit us with it, and it's not funny. So that makes it a little easier on me. I don't have that moment where, oh, we're crickets. No one wants to hear crickets. I mean, I did have a bit that I thought was really funny. It's where so a lot of my humor is where I sort of set up that I have abilities that they soon see that that's not really the case. So I might talk about speaking 18 different languages, and that sort of breaks down that does he really talk languages? It doesn't sound like he's really fully communicating in French or Gujarati. I think that's in Indian language, Gujarati. That's like, but there was a bit where I said, one of the things I get to do is I get paid by by big corporations, big CEOs, to come up with new words to infuse into their culture to help motivate their teams. And there were a bunch of portmanteaus, if this is a fancy word of combining breakfast and lunch, you get brunch. So I was combining things like, leadership and motivation, you have leadervation, and it would be up on screen. Or cooperation, you want a cooperation engagement, you want co-op engagement. And it was, each of these words were getting sillier and sillier. I found that bit, even though it was interesting, wasn't getting the laughs for the amount of time that I'm doing it. So
Right.
I worked it a couple of times. It took a lot of work because there was a lot of memorization and all that stuff. And eventually I said, it's not worth it. So I let it go. But it wasn't like it was bombing. It was interesting, but not as funny as I'd like it to be. So that's
Right.
how I judge it.
Right. You know what I learned? It's a little different, Scott, but I used to, for at least a decade, I used to tell people when they introduced me, my introduction was literally one sentence or so, and Rob will probably do a better job at this than I can. Why don't we bring him up? And so I kind of got out of that. Don't over pump me, don't under pump. Let me just do it. But I used to tell sort of the Rob Jolles story. And I got to tell you, I think it's a really good story, but it's almost like what you were just describing. I was really enjoying it. And this is a book title. Maybe you and I both write this one. I've always loved the title. It looked good on paper. Okay. It looked good on paper, Scott.
Yes.
But after a while, I realized it's going on too long. I'm more interested in this than they are. I have to really I can't tell them I started here and went to there, but that wasn't working. And here's what it taught me. Nah, let's get to the meat of this message. And you have to kind of look in the mirror and go, no matter how much you like it, the audience just isn't responding to it. And that's a tough lesson.
I thought this bit was really funny, and it had a great payoff, but it was a long way to get the payoff. And even though I was putting these two words together, and they were absurd, and that's where the laughter was. Another interesting thing. I'll say that in a moment. But eventually, you just have to go, oh, I like this more. It was not. A lot of comedians go, oh, it was too smart for the audience. In the comedy clubs. No, it just wasn't funny. It just wasn't funny. But yeah, so you somehow at times have to just sort of just jettison things. As you said, it was funnier to me than it was for the audience.
Right, right. Well, you're married?
Yes. Oh no.
Well, you were.
Yeah, I was married. Yeah, it's
Okay,
been. Don't worry, it's been like 15 years. I'm
Yeah.
not sure why I answered that
Well,
way.
I
Maybe
know
just
my
having
wife.
kids.
My wife loves to tell me, "You're the only one laughing at that." It
Right.
wasn't that funny. But I will tell you, Scott, every time she says it, I'm vested. I'm like, well, they should be because it's damn funny. But when I do it at a corporate gig, no, yeah, no, it won't work that way. How about hecklers? Let's talk about that for a second. Again, comedy club. It's probably fun for you. You can cut somebody's legs out from under them, and the for the most part, the audience knows what's going on. But corporate gigs are different. So tell me, kind of in your mind, the difference between and just let me straighten this out. It is rare. I actually call them snipers, not hecklers. In a corporate gig, they're not drunk and belligerent, but they didn't want to be there. They're angry at the company, for whatever reason, and they're in your audience and they saw an opening and it comes out. That's sort of what the heckle sounds like. How do you respond to it?
Well, interestingly enough, I've never had it happen. I mean, it's not a glamorous way to respond to this. I think there's just too much pressure on them first of all, they'd have to stand out. It is a company event. They're going to be the ones who are going to have HR or their job in jeopardy. But there were some interactive things that I would do in a comedy club, and I needed sort of straight responses. And I'm going to let you in on a little secret here. But so if they said something, I had a way to tame them. I would never, it would just be so uncomfortable to make someone look bad. I mean, I think organizers' biggest fears about bringing comedians in. What if they say something wrong, or what if they make someone feel bad? So I kind of take that off the table. So a couple of things that I do that look like they're just random volunteers. They're people I've spoke to in the past, because I want to cover that. And it's not that they're going to say something bad. I don't want to put someone on the spot and I need them to be the straight person in this routine, and they feel under pressure with the lights on them, oh, I got to say something funny, which throws off the timing.
Right.
And a lot of everything that's, a lot of stuff that goes on stage and entertainment, there's an element of illusion. The audience doesn't always know that, but with some things, I feel like I have to prep it. I had, there was a piece I did where I sort of said something and I didn't really know the background of this person. And I don't want to go into it because I don't want to bring it up again. And she was fine with it, but the audience reaction to it was a little off. And while I'm going through the bit, I'm realizing, oh, that didn't get as much of a laugh. And the next one, not as much of a laugh. And then I find out what happened afterwards. And I said, I've got to control this situation more. So when I'm doing something where I know it could go off, I cover myself that way by, talking to someone for, a few minutes before the thing. Hey, this is what I'm going to do. This is what you need to do. And then do it that way.
I think if you cross into the workshop world,
Mhm.
you're going to experience it a little bit every now and then. I mean, it's a once a year event. It's not that big a deal.
Right.
And a lot of times the one thing we don't do is engage. My theory is first one's always free. Sometimes people just say things that came out wrong. So don't go into your bag of tricks because somebody made you feel badly. Second time you hear it, you realize, okay, it's not an accident. And the problem, Scott, is if we ignore it, it begins to take away from the other 18 people in the workshop. So who are looking to you going, do anything. So we relay, that's an interesting question, Scott. How the rest of you feel about this? And we let the audience handle it. But to your point, we never engage. And the closest I ever got, I think you might find this humorous. I used to carry, I still do every now and then as giveaways. I call them Rob Jollis Action Series posters. Okay, near me, speaking. It's like you just won a Rob Jollis Action Series poster. It's autographed, and it's nobody's angry because they didn't win it. My hand was up first, and so they're okay. But I had one I kept in the back of my laptop bag. And it was from the beach. You can get your head put into another character. I was in Dr. Evil's head, okay? And the line was, I found your participation in today's workshop positively evil. And I said, thank you, this and that. And Larry, I got something special for you too. Handed it to him. And I got to tell you, you could feel the air come out of that room. Which if you're going to lose air in a room, don't lose in the last 15 seconds. 10 minutes, twice. I had no time to
even you thought it'd be funny, or you thought
put him in
his place?
I thought it would be, I think I was a little bit angry and maybe I wasn't in check that day. That happens. If I'm over delivering, I'm not quite as empathetic as I normally am. Whatever reason, it was in Austin, Texas. And boy, I tell you, that was one of those moments where I went up and apologized afterwards. And B, it was like, and that poster will never be taken on the road again. But that's how careful we have to be in a corporate environment. Let the manager handle it, whatever. Stay above it, stay past it. But again, I hear my son talking about heckling. It's like, no, we just you just got to roll with the punches, and hopefully management, if it happens 3 times, somebody from the company will take care of it, but just rise above. Anyway, all right. How about we're coming down the home stretch? Swap about maybe the strangest gig you ever did. Corporate gig.
Strangest corporate gig I ever did.
Or maybe just an activity you did in the gig or something, but give me something where you remember that one.
Well, I think it's more like venues that I kind of remember. It wasn't strange, but I've had to do arenas at times. And that's something I've done an arena where it was a proscenium stage and they were just out there. So, you have, you don't have a lot of time to prep. We'll do a rehearsal or something, but you're in an environment that you're not used to. It's so much bigger. There's so many more people. So that was kind of fun just to, you feel kind of like, hey, I'm shooting my my Netflix special on something like that. I've also done an arena where I'm in the round. So you're literally learning. I've done a lot of different rounds in a smaller venue. It's not that when I say smaller, 2,000-3,000 people. But when you have 10,000 people and it's in the round, it's just things like what you're, where you want, you're thinking constantly, how do I want to present, where you want to walk, even if you're doing, you've done rounds before, it's still something to have a little bit more consciousness of where I'm going to be. Audio is always a little bit different. And then also how the laughter comes in. So you just have to kind of adjust for it. As any speaker or even as a comedian, you want to, luckily most of the stuff I've had to do is, you know, um, indoors and, with theaters and lighting. I did once have to do like kind of a luncheon. It was outdoors. And I don't know if it was so much strange. It was a small audience, but I don't know what happened, but my throat, maybe it was nerves or something, just got really, really dry. And I just remember trying to find some way. I got some water, but that was kind of an uncomfortable feeling where your voice was losing. And I just recently I did a gig in the Philippines. I was in Manila, company I worked with for a while, and I was actually just emceeing that program. But it was a real interesting experience, and that one was I got sick. And I thought it was just nothing. And then it got to the point where I was almost losing my voice. And I, this was strange. I found out when I was on stage that if I was to enact a British accent, I used a different part of my throat and I was
Unbelievable.
able to communicate better. So it opened me. I only did it for a brief period of time, but to be that vulnerable where you're all about your voice and losing your voice and finding a way around it. And luckily I had ways to connect with them from the beginning. I do this thing with smaller groups. I can't do it all the time, but I'm prepping right now for a keynote next week where I'm doing it. I have the ability, I think other people can do it if I show them how to do it, but I can memorize a whole bunch of names. So it was a group of, this new group's at 80, this was 75. I can memorize everyone's name. So I eventually have everyone stand up and I go and, call out everyone's name, everyone sits down. So talk about building rapport. Like, there are people who I know their first and last name and what company they were in. They're a little freaked out. And I mean, just anyone mentioning your name in sales, everyone
Right.
loves to hear their names.
Right.
I've clocked every time you said Scott. We just love it. Right, Rob? We just love it. And so the fact that someone who's coming in and somehow I live in Portugal and somehow this guy knows who I am is a great way. So because I built that foundation, they gave me a little bit of leeway with the loss of voice. I also learned a great lesson. I said to someone, I would never have done anything differently, even though it was a challenge for me. I learned a lot about authenticity that day. I learned about just really connecting and not having to rely on a lot of stagecraft and like tricks and stuff. So that was probably one of the oddest gigs that I had because I was infirmed a little bit.
Yeah. But it kind of goes back to that, what we have working for us with corporate audiences, which is they so appreciate the effort. They so appreciate a guy trying as hard as he possibly or she possibly can. And so I think you were probably compensating on that side. So you probably gave a heck of a presentation. I don't know about you, but when you were talking about, ooh, and it happened in the Philippines, my mind immediately went whenever I go out of the country. I don't really call it pressure, but I'm always a little bit more anxious of I've flown so far. I really want to make this good. When I fly to Topeka, no offense to Topeka, I'm trying to get myself excited about Topeka. I don't have to get excited about the Philippines.
Yeah,
I have
almost
to I
dropped
have to
into a
almost
dice
hold it
clay.
in, like
Yeah.
like a horse with bridle, like, control your emotions because I want to crush when I've been to Malaysia and Kuala Lumpur, and I remember going out there and and having to settle myself down, not out of nervousness, but just wanting like a racehorse that wanted to run just a little bit too fast. I had to slow it down a little bit, and that's what travel does sometimes. But that's me. I don't, I would have felt it in the Philippines. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, be a beautiful country, be a beautiful people. I really enjoyed the experience there. Yeah, it took a little while there. Talking about traveling internationally, I don't do a lot of work internationally, but I have a podcast as well. I had a global speaker or a global keynote and MC on yesterday, and he was talking about the differences in dealing with different countries and different cultures. And I think I'd have a harder time doing comedy, not because of the references. The culture responds differently to
Yeah.
entertainers there. Swiss people very close to the vest, German people very, very kind of serious. And it would take me some time to get used to the fact that I can't just throw away a line and get a normal laugh that I get here in the States and not get it there.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I think doing comedy, in Europe, a lot of the comedy is very broad. That's why clowning is very big in Europe. Things have to be bigger, broader, more physical. They can't be as cerebral. In London, you can do that. But
Right.
when you go to some of the other countries, they're getting a little bit, there's a cultural difference, and you have to get, used to that.
Well, then maybe that's why they held on to Jerry Lewis so long,
Yes.
right?
No, exactly.
I went to Cairo. First time I went to Cairo, I was on the big radio station there, like the one big American, English speaking, where because of tourism, everybody was listening. And I thought I gave him the greatest interview. And I got called back the next time I was there to be on the radio show. And guess why? I got called back because they just sitting by the Nile. The guy said, "Could you do some just bumpers for the show?" But I did them sort of in my Jerry Lewis accent. I just made him really funny. Well, I'm in Cairo, and people were, they said for like a year, people were calling in, "Could you play that bumper again?" They loved that. Well, what about me and my books and my fascinating life? No. They wanted to hear the
Right.
bumpers that I made. But
That's funny.
you know what? They invited me back to Cairo, so we learned.
Well, there's a comedian named Andrew Schultz. Your son definitely knows about him. He
Uh-huh.
blew up during the pandemic. He was doing some really interesting things on Instagram. Joe Rogan really supported him for a while, and now he's doing arenas all over the world. He's got a podcast. But I saw him in I think it was maybe it was Dubai or something. It was United Arab Emirates, somewhere out there. And talk about cultures. They were laughing as hard as any American audience. So I don't know. I'm sure he's gone to some of these other countries, but I guess when they're going to a comedy experience, they're ready to laugh. I think it's in the business environment where that culture will have a little conflict when, hey, we're not supposed to be laughing here.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm not saying international audiences don't have a good time or don't know how to laugh. I think they need to be knowing, hey, I'm going to see comedy and then I'm
Right.
going to laugh.
Right. Although I will tell you that a few places that I've been to, I remember them coming up and actually saying, "Oh, you're the funny American." And that was how I was being introduced. I'm like, I am. They just expected because I was an American that I would be funny.
Right.
Go figure.
No, but we don't know each other well. You have a son that's a comedian. He didn't just pick it up anywhere. You were the guy who was kind of funny with friends. You have a good sense of humor. You probably, I tell people that, doing stand up and being funny to your friends, two different things. You got to be able to bring that sort of, very intimate sort of, these are your friends, you feel safe, and bring that on stage. That's the transition comics go through. And
Right.
so I know without seeing your presentation, they still think you're funny, even though you're not doing comedy. Because
Right.
you're presenting funny. You have a sense of humor. You're not taking things seriously. Is that accurate?
You're
Mr.
damn right it's
Jones?
accurate, or I wouldn't be in
Yeah.
business. It's
Right.
just funny that they already knew that. But
Right.
yeah, no, I lean on humor. I don't. Maybe that 30%'s up a little bit. I'm
I think it
still
might be
changing
up,
myself.
but 30% is a lot for
Yeah.
a presentation. I
Right.
mean, I would hope there was 70% more in sales training, but he's telling us this in a funny way. It's more of a, people just get a sense of people. So whether you might have only done like a few, like I only did a few lines that were funny, and they came up to me and go, "Oh my God, you're so funny." And it's more if they get sort of a sense of you. It's more of your
Right.
personality. This guy's got a good sense of humor.
Yeah. Yeah. Scott, I could talk to you all day. I really appreciate you coming in. We got you can judge a book by its cover. Scott seems uninterested in that book, but I'm very interested in the book. The
I
cover
am
is
so
hysterical.
interested. Why would you
Are
say I'm
you?
not interested in the book? Yes, I am so interested. I want people to go out and get it. Do you know what the book is? It's a book of faux book covers. So
Yes.
you talk about how the book came to you. I'm gonna round out on this one. I started putting it up as a marketing thing, just funny book covers, make fun of. I parody personal and professional development books. And then I wrote little essays as if these were a little blurb about the book. And I put so many of them together. I put a real book together of faux book covers. And, didn't know the pandemic was coming in 20. My book launched in December of 19, so didn't get to sell it as much, but I do give them out at my events and stuff like that. And I might come up with a second one, but I think it's a great book, and everyone who seems to have read it have enjoyed it. So
Good.
that's
Good.
something.
I saw it and immediately thought of Kramer's book on coffee, the coffee table book.
Yes.
When I saw it, I went, it's kind of like this.
That's a great analogy. Yeah.
Good. Well, all right. Well, then you heard it. This is a book by an audience, so they're used to authors. So there it is. You can judge a book by its cover. And Scott wants you to go look at that book and not only get it, but write him a nice review when you do. And give me that website again, how they get a hold of you.
They can reach me at scottbloomconnects.com.
Beautiful. All right. That's for the corporate clients as well. Good. Scott, can't thank you enough. I usually 98% of my guests come through publicists, but I actually saw something that Scott posted on LinkedIn, and it just shows you, don't give up on LinkedIn, folks. And I just reached out to him and we started exchanging emails and messages, and here we go. So terrific job. Great meeting you. Thanks so much for being on the show, really.
Thank you, Rob. Really appreciate it. Really enjoyed our conversation.
Bingo. Well, we'll do it again as well as we can next time, everybody. Until then, stay safe.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please rate and recommend it on iTunes, Outcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more information on this show and Rob at jollis.com.